Happy Thursday. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you very much for tuning in today. A busy show. We are going to look at the midway point NHL awards, going to look at what's next following the Pasacal Siakam trade from the Toronto Raptors to the Indiana Pacers from yesterday, going to look at maybe a bit of a missed opportunity for the Toronto Blue Jays, and then our UFC 297 preview continues, taking maybe a bit of a step away from what's going on at UFC 297 and looking at some of the other big fights that have been announced recently across the MMA landscape. And we close today's show with today's ticket. So a lot to get to. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Remember, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment if there's something I say that you really like, or I guess don't. And if you are if you're listening in podcast form, please remember to leave a review and subscribe to the channel. You can find me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I am at Primetime Klein, twitch.tv/primetimepk, and you can email this show, couchpotatodiary@yahoo.com. Okay, so that is all the shilling I have to do. Let's get into it. Let's talk some awards from the National Hockey League. Okay, we are at the midway point, basically, in the National Hockey League season. Some teams have roared past, like the Calgary Flames. Some teams are not quite there yet. But we are going to look at the NHL awards for the current season here in the NHL. Let's start with Coach of the Year, and I think it has to be Jim Montgomery with the Boston Bruins. A season of tumult in Boston, where you have Patrice Bergeron leave, David Krejci leave. You have a lot of unprovens coming into the lineup, and a lot of people expected the Boston Bruins to just completely fall off the face of the earth. And the exact opposite has happened. They are one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference and the National Hockey League again. And so I do, credit has to go, obviously, to the Marchands and the Pasternaks and the young kids who have stepped up as well as the tandem that they have between the pipes. But I do think you do have to give a lot of credit to Jim Montgomery for just rolling with what they have, putting in a system in place to help them build, and just kind of go from there. So Jim Montgomery is my Jack Adams Award winner currently. My Norris Trophy goes to Quinn Hughes. I don't know how you can give it to anyone else at this point. He is leading the charge on a Vancouver Canucks team that kind of just fluctuates between first and second in the NHL right now, given depending on what the Winnipeg Jets are doing. But he has found another level to his game, and the dynamic approach he has to the offensive side of things makes him a real weapon with this Canucks team, and a massive part, as the captain now, a massive part of what has grown out in Vancouver. And, obviously, we are in such an amazing time for defensemen in the NHL, with Cale Makar stepping up every single year as well, and guys like Heiskanen and all of them as well. But I feel like this season, Quinn Hughes' play has just stood out above the rest to me. So Quinn Hughes gets the Norris Trophy vote. The Calder right now is Connor Bedard. That gets a little bit interesting as time goes on. How much time is too much time for this rookie to miss when there are other rookies who are stepping up, including out here in Calgary with Connor Zary? But, as of right now, if the awards were to happen today, it's him. There is no question. He has been everything that is advertised. I'm going to be right on I think I'm going to be right on my Bedard under 30 goals this year, but I think only because of injuries. He doesn't have anyone around him, and he has been elite. It's been a remarkable performance from Connor Bedard to start this season, and one that absolutely would deserve this award for Rookie of the Year. My Vezina, just for a few reasons. Obviously, I think he's playing well, but maybe not his best season, but I do think that the Winnipeg Jets deserve some kind of recognition on here, and so I'm putting Connor Hellebuyck as the goalie of the year. You can make a very compelling case for Adin Hill, but I feel like, again, Connor Hellebuyck is one of the top goalies in the world, and his team is playing out of their minds. So I feel like Connor Hellebuyck deserves the nod right now for goaltender of the year, which is obviously the Vezina Trophy. There are nights where it's like, oh, this guy simply is the best goalie on the planet right now. That has been quite the thing for him to do, and a huge part of what the Winnipeg Jets have been able to do this season. And now my Hart Trophy vote, and this one might be a little out there, I think, but I have to right now give it on the best player who is on what is looking like the best team, and that's Elias Pettersson on the Vancouver Canucks. There are guys who have more points, absolutely there are. And honestly, this will probably end up being a McDavid, right? Like this will probably, he will likely go on, well, is already in the midst of just a ridiculous run and end up leading the NHL in points, even though at the quarter point he was at 150th, and he will go on his way to win the Hart Trophy. But for right now, Elias Pettersson has been the straw that has stirred the drink with the Vancouver Canucks. He is a big reason why so many players on this team are having career years, and I think he is the biggest reason why, with all due respect to a lot of the other guys that are there, I think he is the biggest reason why this team has been able to exceed all of the expectations so far. If you take him off of this team, I think they're just kind of a middle of the pack team, but he has solidified himself as a top 10 player in the National Hockey League and solidified himself as someone who has really stepped into this role as like one of the true great players in this league right now. Again, there are guys with more points, but I just think with how good Vancouver is playing and how important he is to that team, I think he deserves the odd of the MVP, which is the Hart Trophy. But overall, like, it's been a fun start to the season in the NHL. There's obviously been some weird stories and some downer stories. 100% there has been. But you look at what's happening in Vancouver and Winnipeg right now. You look at the types of playoff races that are developing specifically out west, but east as well. You have some marquee teams that are going to miss the playoffs this season. I think you have less bad teams this year as the Connor Bedard sweepstakes are over. And while we all appreciated what Macklin Celebrini did for Team Canada at the World Juniors, he ain't that dude. So I think that there is a real growth happening here with this NHL. We are in an amazing time for the league. Again, we have frustration about how several parts of the Blackhawks situation was handled. The Pride Tape situation has been just an abysmal failure by the National Hockey League across the board. And obviously you can tell where I stand on that matter. There has been, I don't think officiating has been particularly good. But when you just look at the talent out on the ice right now in the NHL, there is no question about it that things are going really, really well for this league, and the sport of hockey is in a tremendous place. Not just NHL, right? Like the PWHL is balling out right now. The World U18, like it sucks that Canada drops into the bronze medal game, but that means other nations are coming, and that is huge for women's hockey. So it is such a great time to be a hockey fan if you just ignore the people in charge of it. Let's move into some basketball as the Raptors and Pacers pulled off a big blockbuster, which now has everyone wondering, what's next? So, Pasacal Siakam is now a member of the Indiana Pacers. Bruce Brown's a Raptor, as will be 3 future first-round picks in this blockbuster deal. And so now the question automatically turns to what next? Well, apparently, Pasacal Siakam was the only thing holding the Raptors back from being an absolute juggernaut after scoring almost 80 points in the first half against the Miami Heat and then over 120 in the game. So clearly, Pasacal Siakam is this generation's Rudy Gay, and the Raptors are going to go on an immaculate run of unparalleled success over the next decade. Or not. That's probably not going to be what happens. I think for Toronto, this has to be like the official, obviously, like they've sold the 2 biggest parts, right? That those are the 2 marquee ones. But I think you're not putting sold yet on the for sale sign. You are keeping that for sale sign out in the front yard of this apartment complex. We have sold the penthouses, but we still got some pretty good stuff here throughout the rest of this building that I think Toronto should be selling off. I think at this point for Toronto, Scotty Barnes is obviously an untouchable. Emmanuel Quickley as well. And it would just suck with all the fun that we're having with RJ Barrett being the Canadian on the Raptors if you then flipped him right away. Obviously, if someone comes with a Godfather offer, I think for those last 2, you have to look at it. But I think given the lack of a superstar in this draft, it would be really tough for me to imagine the Raptors getting something that would entice you off of Quickley or Barrett. So to me, those guys are the untouchables. But the next level, I think you can get something a little bit interesting for them. Dennis Schroeder at point guard had an amazing World Cup of basketball, has been fine for the Raptors this season, certainly has not been a problem for Toronto this year. And for teams who need a little bit depth at point guard, he is a phenomenal option to come off of the bench for a high caliber team. And just a really good ball handler, very skilled on the offensive side of things. So I think he could be someone who could get you another pretty decent return. I think Gary Trent Jr. is probably as good as gone from a Raptor standpoint. He has been great at moments. He was great last night. He has had his ups and downs with this team. There's no question. But again, from an offensive, purely just scoring the ball standpoint, Gary Trent Jr. is someone who I think can really help again a scoring needy team in the postseason. Like I wonder that the two guys who I just mentioned, I think would be, and I haven't done salary matches or anything like that, but I think those guys would be really good fits on the LA Lakers, a team that I think needs to improve their offense a little bit. And so I think those would be two guys who could help that group score the basketball. Just spitballing here, right? But those are, I think, two options that could really get you a decent return. You're not going to get 3 first-round picks for those two guys, but you could get something. And the last one, and it's tricky because they just signed him to a contract, but everyone needs a big now, right? Like, if nothing else, Jakob Poeltl could be someone who could foul Jokic 5 times or foul Embiid 5 times in a playoff series or in a playoff game. And the contract, I do think, makes it a little bit cumbersome to attempt to move. But I think in a league that is starting to recognize the importance of a big man again, I think that Poeltl could be someone who gets you, again, a pretty decent return. I think the Raptors are probably good on first-round picks in 2024. They have 2, potentially 3, depending on how bad the rest of this season goes. And you have the Detroit Pistons pick, which is right now slated to be the 31st overall pick in the draft. So the Raptors, I think, are probably good on this mediocre draft this year. Now, I do think there's a couple of ways to look at it. The 24 draft class is not getting anywhere close to the hype of the 23 draft class. And so, on the one hand, it's like, well, I don't really want guys in this draft, so let's try to get other ones. On the other hand, if you think you have a couple of diamonds in the rough here, and it's like, you know what, maybe teams are undervaluing these picks. This is a rare opportunity to get some of these first round picks that we can bring in here. There might be a market inefficiency. But again, as we talked about yesterday on the Instant Reaction show, this has not been an organization that has found many of those diamonds in the rough. I think some people thought they might have with Koloko. He was placed on waivers yesterday. Now, he's had a respiratory issue all season long, but that one hasn't clicked in the same way. And so I don't know if I'm trusting this group right now on just absolutely nailing some of these first-round picks. But if you could get some future firsts in these deals, and again, a couple of young guys who can maybe have some experiments on, I think that's probably where the Raptors are looking right now. But the fire sale is certainly on out in Toronto. And I think the next part for the Raptors here, I think you have to give Grady Dick an extended run. He was good last night. He has that nice dish to RJ Barrett for the dunk. He was fine. And so now I think just give the kids some opportunities. I don't think this is a Raptors team that will ever just full on, well, those are 5 guys you've never heard of before. Let's go. I think this is going to be a Raptor team that we have a bunch of dudes out there who are 23, 24, 25 years old, and we're going to see what happens. That feels like where the Raptors are going to be going. And I think Grady Dick has to be, a relatively important part of that and see what you actually have in this dude going forward, because he seems like the style of player that would fit at the NBA level with his affinity for shooting and his confidence in college. But that confidence has not translated over into the NBA game at all. If you can get him on a bit of a run, maybe you unearth something. And I'm not saying, well, if Grady Dick turns into a great 3-point shooter, then all of a sudden the Raptors are a championship contender. But it's just one less thing to have to worry about come draft time and come building this team to whatever it's going to be in the future. So I do think you have to give him a bit of an extended look now. On the Pacers side, what does this make the Indiana Pacers? Well, one thing, it makes them really good. Right? Like, with all due respect to Bruce Brown, he was not going to be a part, I think, of a championship pedigree with the Pacers. He is a fine player, and I would imagine he's renting, not buying in Toronto. I'll say it that way. I think that he is someone who probably ends up on his way out at some point here. But for the Pacers, they add an all-star caliber player while only really eliminating Brown from your rotation, your solid playoff rotation. So that is a significant upgrade. It doesn't make them better than Boston. It doesn't make them better than Milwaukee, and it doesn't make them better than Philadelphia. It puts them in the conversation with the next group, though, right? Like, I think, Nerf gun to my head, as Zach Lowe likes to say, I'm still picking Cleveland over Indiana, in football mode. But after that, I think they're better than the Knicks. I certainly think they're better than the Miami Heat right now. So they have worked their way into that 4-5 conversation, have a chance to win a round, and then hope you Cinderella your way into the Eastern Conference Finals, which is a great place to grow from when you have a Halliburton and a Turner and now a Pasacal Siakam. They have a strong foundation to be a player in the Eastern Conference and at least win around and be a team that the other group doesn't really want to face in the second round of the postseason. So kudos to Indiana that I think they have done a really good job, and it puts pressure on that other group now, right? Like the Knicks were rumored to be in on Siakam for a very long time. That's clearly not going to happen now. The Miami Heat have been in on everybody for a while, and they've uncharacteristically struck out a little bit. And now what does Cleveland do, right? Like Donovan Mitchell apparently isn't long for the Cavaliers. What direction do they go? But I think it puts pressure now on some of these East teams to maybe get in on a Zach LaVine sweepstakes or DeJounte Murray out of Atlanta. I think it puts pressure on some of these teams that have aspirations of at least being where the Pacers are of, yeah, we could win a round, maybe two in the Eastern playoffs. I think that math has changed, especially I think for the Knicks and for the Miami Heat, because it just kind of knocks them down and it kind of knocks Miami into play-in territory now, I think. And it puts the Knicks in a spot where you are playing one of the big three in the first round of the playoffs. And a first-round playoff exit I don't think was in the cards for a lot of people for the Knicks this season. So I think the pressure is on for those teams now to improve themselves here. And I think it adds an interesting wrinkle here to get this done less than a month before the trade deadline, but not a day before the trade deadline. It lets these teams kind of assess the market and now see, like, where do we stand and how important is it for us to improve now? So I think it really shakes the trade market up here in the NBA. So a fun stretch coming up here, I think, for the National Basketball Association. A couple quick baseball thoughts here. Some big news from baseball yesterday that doesn't directly affect the Toronto Blue Jays, but I think indirectly affects them greatly. There has been an issue with Bally Sports. We're not going to get too into it, but basically they have a bunch of TV networks that carry baseball regionally. Like they have the regional rights for a number of baseball teams across MLB, and they're bankrupt. And so many of these teams now get so much of their money from their regional sports networks that it kind of hindered what some of these teams could do. Like you saw a lot of one-year contracts from the St. Louis Cardinals, and you've seen a lot of teams just be like, I'm good, man. I'm out. No, not worrying about it. We're gonna see what happens with this before we can really start to commit some dollars. The Blue Jays aren't in that spot. The same company that owns the Blue Jays owns the TV network that they're on. So regional sports network, kind of covered. Quite frankly, the Jays don't have a regional sports network. They have a national sports network with Sportsnet. So this felt like potentially an opportunity for Toronto to, again, flex a bit of financial muscle, not in the way that the Dodgers or even the Yankees could, but flex a bit of financial muscle here in the middle part of this market and try to grow the team that way. And now that edge feels like it is gone with Amazon coming in and basically buying up all of those. So now there's going to be an influx of Amazon money into Major League Baseball, and that's going to help out some of these teams who are relying on those market deals. And so now the competition, I think, has increased greatly for the Blue Jays and for some of the players that they were looking to add here. And so if I know this, the free agents know it, and so that's probably why they weren't just going to accept a lowball offer from Toronto to go to the Blue Jays. They were going to wait for the regional sports money to come in as well. But it does feel like this was a window that the Jays had that now has kind of gone away. I do think it means the free agent market picks up substantially over the next couple of weeks here as a little bit more certainty gets brought into this. At least that's my thought on how this is all going to play out. All right. We took a bit of a break from it yesterday. Let's get back into our look in the MMA world as we get ready for 297. We continue to get ready for UFC 297 out in Toronto, coming up this Saturday night. In the main event, it is Sean Strickland against Dricus du Plessis for the UFC's middleweight championship, one of two title fights on this card. We have been getting ready for this all week. I am relatively excited for a lot of the fights coming up on Saturday night. We're going to have a full preview of the card coming up on Friday's show. But for right now, let's look at some of the other things that are happening around the world of MMA. And we begin with Tatiana Suarez, who is out of UFC 298. This was one of the big fights that we were talking about a couple of UFCs ago, as Suarez is someone who has had a 4-year layoff, but at her best is an absolute juggernaut and had the potential to be the next face of women's mixed martial arts, in my opinion. And so now a 4-year layoff, now she has to wait a couple of months. On the one hand, it doesn't sound like it's a long-term injury. So it sounds like we could be getting her back sooner rather than later. So you've waited 4 years, what's another few months? On the other hand, it's someone who's been out for 4 years. And so when you have someone who has that lengthy injury history, it doesn't go great. Or it doesn't look great when they then have an injury that delays their fight. So hopefully, like, perfect world, she's right and ready to go a couple of months from now at UFC 300, and you put you put a spotlight on another really good contender for the UFC. But this one, it's just a bummer, man. Was really excited to see that particular fight. There has been a lot going on in the Bellator PFL area, and so I think there's a lot to cover there. We will get to that in a second here, but speaking of UFC 300, Jim Miller is going to be on UFC 300, coming off of his win at UFC Vegas 84 last weekend. Jim Miller is going to be on the card, and the reason this is so exciting is that this is someone who has, like, again, the most fights in the history of the UFC, most wins in the history of the UFC, and on down the line, most cage time in the history of the sport as well. But he's also been on UFC 100 and UFC 200 in what has been a remarkable career for him. Now he's got a fight booked, UFC 300. He's going to take on Bobby Green. This is not a fight that is going to dictate a whole lot in the rankings, but it's going to be fun as hell to watch these two veterans of the fight game go head-to-head in that octagon at UFC 300. I cannot wait for this fight, and I just love that it is happening. Also at UFC 300, it is going to be the BMF title on the line with Justin Gaethje against Max Holloway. This is going to be I think the potential to be an all-timer, especially given the platform, again, UFC 300. To have this level of violence, I think, is going to be a blast for people. For Gaethje, he called for a title fight. There is a title eliminator on this card, so he is going to have to win at least this fight to get that title opportunity, and honestly, probably another one if he wants that shot at the belt at 155 pounds. But this has been a nice little run for him. He's won 3 in a row now, coming off of a couple of losses where it felt like maybe it's it. Or he's going to be looking for 3 wins in a row, after a couple of losses where it's like, maybe this is it. Going up against Max Holloway, who is so clearly the best 145-pounder in the world, not named Alex Volkanovski, but now he has to move, I think, to 100. This is a necessary move. He's not going to get a 4th title shot against Volkanovski, and Topuria does not seem like someone I'd want to be fucking with right now. So I think Holloway is someone who presents an interesting challenge coming up here at coming up to 155 pounds at UFC 300. He has a body type that fits, right? Like, he's not going to look small at 155. He's kind of looked big for 145. So I think he's going to be fine when it comes to the reach advantage. He's not a one-hitter quitter power guy anyway at his best. Like, he can do it. He punches harder than I can, that's for sure. But he is someone who is going to just overwhelm you with volume. And I think moving up to 155 pounds isn't going to slow that down. So I'm very fascinated to see this fight. Early thought is that it goes Gaethje, but I can't wait to break this fight down and dive into a little bit more to veterans of the fight game. And speaking of the title eliminator at UFC 300, it is going to be Charles Oliveira against Arman Tsarukyan. Tsarukyan coming off of a big fight over Beneil Dariush, and he has really exploded up here in the rankings at 155 pounds. And I think is one of the names to watch at lightweight. But this is a huge jump up against Charles de Bronx, who is one of the all-time greats at 155 pounds. And so it's a great bit of matchmaking. It's really fun. And it's great to see, like, okay, is Tsarukyan the next guy? Is he what he has shown over the next little bit? Can he do that against the top of the top? Because if you can beat Charles de Bronx, you can beat anybody in the lightweight division. And so we will get that opportunity to see that at UFC 300. And then Davison Figueiredo looking for back-to-back wins in a new division, taking on Cody Garbrandt. Figueiredo opening up as a minus 310 favorite. Garbrandt making a bit of a push. He's won back-to-back fights, while Figueiredo beats Rob Font in his move up to 135 pounds. I initial thought is I think Figueiredo runs right through Garbrandt. I think this is a good bit of like star building for Figueiredo because I think this is going to be an all action fight and it kind of solidifies him as a potential challenger. It's a big name. It's going to be a fun fight. And for Cody, and if he loses, Cody Garbrandt then has won 3 in a row. It's a recognizable name. You can tell a bit of a retribution story or whatever, even though Cody is wildly unlikable. You can tell a bit of a story there. So no matter how this fight ends up going, you can tell a lot of fun stories for it for the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Mentioned before, PFL and Bellator have announced their first big card. And one of the names that I think everyone should watch out for is Vadim Nemkov. He moves up to heavyweight, vacating the Bellator 205-pound, the light heavyweight championship. He is going to face the PFL heavyweight champion, Bruno Carazola, I'm saying that wrong. Caraloza. Sorry. Don't talk a lot of PFL, so I haven't had to say that name before. I think Nemkov has the opportunity to be the face of this new brand. Obviously, there are like the marquee names, right? Like they have a deal with Jake Paul. They have a deal with Francis Ngannou, although they don't appear to be high on Ngannou's priorities at the moment. But they have a couple of big name deals. But in terms of the, like, not just popping in once or twice a year kind of guys, like the real, like, that this guy is going to be a full-time ambassador for PFL. Nemkov has the opportunity to be that. He has been just a beast in the light heavyweight division in Bellator, and now he moves up to heavyweight. I am always so intrigued by guys at 205 pounds moving up to the heavyweight landscape, because I think 205 traditionally has been significantly more difficult than heavyweight is. And Bellator's heavyweight champion is the one who's done that, with Ryan Bader moving up. So I think this is a really fun opportunity, but I would say Nemkov has the chance to be like the guy from this group and kind of the guy who fight fans would point to as like, well, yeah, sure, like UFC has most of the good fighters. This might be the best guy not in the UFC right now, and this might be the guy who could beat the other champions in the UFC. Now, moving up to heavyweight, I don't know how many people would say Nemkov could beat John Jones, but I think if you put Nemkov in the 205-pound division in the UFC right now, that guy's taking the title. That's just where I come down on that. Other ones for this card, I think it's interesting that it's going to be in Saudi Arabia. I think it's a bit of a flex to the UFC, who do not have that Saudi money yet. Technically, I guess they do with Endeavor and TKO now, with the WWE having links to the Saudi government. But look, it's weird to talk nice about the Saudi Arabia given everything that's going on and has gone on in that part of the world. But from just a pure fight standpoint, this is a bit of flexing your muscles on the UFC, and it puts a bit of a spotlight on them because a lot of things in Saudi Arabia get that spotlight. For negative reasons, of course, but it does add a bit of grandeur to it, as frustrating as that may be. Renan Ferreira taking on Ryan Bader in the heavyweight division. Bader, I think, is definitely the biggest name. Again, outside of the Jake Paul, Francis Ngannou's, outside of the special attraction guys, in terms of the regular roster, Ryan Bader, I think, has the biggest name coming from the UFC. A title challenger, I believe, in the UFC, at least has fought in title eliminators before, has fought Tito Ortiz, like, big name. And I think probably rolls in this fight in the heavyweight division. It's tricky right now, right? Because you have the PFL heavyweight champion against Nemkov. Ferreira won the heavyweight Grand Prix that they had in 2023. So you're gonna this, I think, basically sets up as like tournament semifinals for what will ultimately be the PFL Bellator World Championship, or however they kind of break it all down. Johnny Eblin is another name. He's going up against Impa Kaganani. Again, sorry for the pronunciations on these. It's a middleweight fight. Eblin, again, is so dangerous. He has been a real force in Bellator right now, in their middleweight division, beating a lot of relatively big names going through there. And he is another one that I think a lot of people are going to take notice for. Like PFL buying out Bellator, I don't think it's great for the sport. It helps their brand out a little bit. Like it makes it, like this fight feels like the most important thing Bellator and PFL have done in a very long time. So you get that initial boost, but I think a lot of the Bellator fighters are going to have a lot of success on these fights. I'll just say that. Patricio Freire, Pitbull, taking on Jesus Pinedo. Pinedo, kind of a Cinderella story through the 145-pound tournament in PFL, just beating like, okay, well now this guy's a tournament favorite, beat him. Okay, well now this guy's a tournament favorite, beat him. All right, this guy, champion. But going up against Patricio, who is a long-time legend in Bellator and one of like the faces on the Mount Rushmore of Bellator. So this will be an intriguing fight because at some point you have to stop doubting the kid. But for right now, I think this one would go to Pitbull. And then there's a couple of other just interesting fights that don't have titles aligned to them. Thiago Santos, former title challenger in the UFC, taking on Yoel Romero, former title challenger in the UFC. Also on this card, Aaron Pico. At one time had top prospect status in the sport, lost that, and has now kind of got it back again. And Clarissa Shields is a big name on this as well. She's going to be fighting on this card. So overall, I think this is a really good card that PFL and Bellator are putting out. I don't love that it's on pay-per-view, but I understand the need to branch out into that realm. And if you're going to do it, excuse me, a fight with all of these fights on it makes all the sense in the world. So I think that the MMA world is set for a really interesting 2024. 2023, I don't think was a banner year for MMA. It wasn't bad, but excuse me, you're set up pretty well, I think, for 2024 here with some of the fights. Even just like UFC 300 is going to be a tentpole event. You have International Fight Week with Conor McGregor. We'll see if Ngannou fights in this calendar year in the PFL, but obviously they have a lot going on in that organization as well. So I think we're going to have a really fun year here in 2024 in mixed martial arts. All right, one thing left to do on the show. Let's close out with today's ticket. We have 5 games on today's ticket. Big Thursday across the sporting world. We'll begin in the NHL. The Edmonton Oilers are on some kind of roll right now, taking on the Seattle Kraken, who exist. No, Seattle's playing some really good hockey as well. But Edmonton, I think, is just an unstoppable force right now. So going to try to ride that momentum with Edmonton minus a goal and a half. We're going to go with the Dallas Stars minus 135 against Philadelphia. Again, the Flyers, a good team, a great story this year. Dallas, I think, is just better. I don't know if they're a goal and a half better, so we're just going to go with the value play on the money line at minus 135. The Montreal Canadiens, plus 165 against Ottawa. Montreal certainly has come back down to earth a little bit, but the Ottawa Senators just aren't a good hockey team right now. It is a team in disarray. The new coach bump lasted about a period, and so I think Montreal gets the job done today. Going to do a bit of a sprinkle on Montreal money line at plus 165. And then last one on the NHL card, Buffalo minus a goal and a half against Chicago. It's Chicago. That's the reasoning for it. And quickly in the NBA, Utah is playing really good basketball right now, but Oklahoma City, I think, is just a bit better. And so I think there's a bit of an overreaction to how well Utah is playing right now in this price. Give me OKC minus 3. So 5 games on today's ticket. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you are listening in podcast form, leave a review and subscribe there. You can find me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I am at Primetime Klein, twitch.tv/primetimepk, and you can email this show, couchpotatodiary@yahoo.com. Coming up on the show tomorrow, full NFL preview for the divisional round. Full UFC 297 preview as we get ready for a very busy weekend in the world of sports. So, thank you all so much for tuning in, and I will talk to all of you later.